Welcome back to the Striha Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Parker Striha, and on today's episode, we are going to be discussing my predictions for 25 of the biggest NFL free agents. I'm by no means a professional, but I do love talking about sports, so thank you for joining me. And just a quick disclaimer, these are just players that I think these teams should prioritize trying to sign. A lot of these can't and won't happen due to cap restrictions and situations that certain teams have. I also don't necessarily think that these players will sign with these teams, but I think the teams should make a run for those players. I hope that makes sense, and let's get into the video. So first off, I have Terron Armstead, an offensive tackle for the New Orleans Saints. The team I think that should go after him really heavily is the Indianapolis Colts. After trading Carson Wentz's contract away, they do, I believe, have the most money, free money in the league. And Eric Fisher is not re-signing with them as of right now, so that leaves a massive hole at left tackle. I think if you can sign Terron Armstead to a relatively, not necessarily a cheap deal because it's not going to be cheap to sign him, but if you can bring him in and put him alongside Quentin Nelson on that left side of the line, you arguably have the best offensive line in the league, and I don't think it would be close. I don't know how much it's going to cost to get him, but I think the Colts would be stupid to not at least be really, really aggressive in trying to get him. Since Anthony Costanzo retired a couple years ago, or I think 2 years ago, that left tackle spot, they just need someone that can go in and they can rely on, and he is one of the best in the business. So if I'm the Colts, I prioritize trying to sign Terron Armstead. Next, I have Chandler Jones, an edge rusher for the Arizona Cardinals, and I think the Arizona Cardinals should prioritize bringing back Chandler Jones. He's been an absolute monster in Arizona, especially week 1 last year. I believe he had 5 sacks against the Titans, and there's no reason why they shouldn't bring him back. Obviously, they didn't put the franchise tag on him, which was kind of surprising, and I also don't think they have the money to sign him to a massive contract, but if they can somehow work up enough money to sign him to keep him in Arizona, I don't see any reason why they shouldn't do that. Keep one of the best defensive players on your team, because if not, I think that pass rush is really going to take a big hit in 2022. Next, I have Tyrann Mathieu, a safety for the Kansas City Chiefs, and I have the Baltimore Ravens signing him. I think the Ravens should be super, super aggressive with trying to sign Tyrann Mathieu, because I think he still has a lot of years left in the tank, and he does have safety and I believe nickel cornerback flexibility, which is super, super helpful for that Ravens team who was really riddled by injuries last year. I think if you can bring him in and have him on the back end and then have Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters at your corner spots, that's one of the best and most reliable secondaries in the league. Although I don't necessarily think it's going to happen. Their safety room is not great, whatsoever. They're going to need a big play player at safety, and I think Tyrann Mathieu fits that perfectly. And if you can, why not take him away from another superpower in the AFC in the Kansas City Chiefs? Next, I have Von Miller, an edge rusher from the Los Angeles Rams, and I think the Denver Broncos should prioritize trying to sign him. Yes, Von Miller, I think, should be going back to the Broncos. The Broncos traded him away last season to the Rams, where he went and won a Super Bowl. But now I think he should go back to the Broncos. They just recently traded for Russell Wilson, which means they are poised for a playoff run. And why not get one of the best defensive players and one of the best players in general that your team has ever had? I don't think he would be expensive if he wants to come back to Denver, because he loves Denver and he's been posting a lot of stuff about potentially coming back if they want him. So I don't see any reason why they shouldn't bring back their former Super Bowl MVP. Next, I have Marcus Williams, a safety for the New Orleans Saints, and I think the Jacksonville Jaguars should prioritize signing him. The Jaguars' safety room is god-awful, really, really bad. And Marcus Williams has been a really solid safety for the Saints since he came into the league. So I think going to the Jaguars, he could help shore up that back end of their defense, which, I mean, that team in general isn't great. So, I mean, they need all the talent that they can get. So I don't see any reason why they shouldn't at least make a push for Marcus Williams, who I think is still only 24 or 25. So he's still really young and has a lot of years left in the tank to play for them. And he could just be a locker room guy. I think he would really help bring that team together. And for a team that just needs talent overall, why not go and get a young safety who, I mean, he'll probably be fairly expensive just when you look at the safety class this year in free agency. He's probably the top guy out there. So it's not going to take, I mean, it's going to take a pretty good sized contract to get him in there. But I think if you can get him in there, he's going to change the culture of your team and he's going to instantly help raise the ceiling of your organization. Next, I have Brandon Scherff, an offensive guard for Washington, and I think the Washington Commanders should prioritize keeping him in Washington. He's really all that team has going for them on the offensive line. He's been one of the best guards in the league since coming into the league. So if I'm Washington, I prioritize keeping him by any means, like plain and simple. Give him whatever money he wants, because if you don't, your offensive line is instantly, in my opinion, probably one of the worst in the league. Because, I mean, having Scherff on your offensive line instantly brings you up a couple notches, but losing him, it just leaves another massive hole that team will have to fill, and I don't know how they'd be able to fill it. Next, I have J.C. Jackson, a cornerback for the New England Patriots, and I think the Indianapolis Colts should prioritize signing him. Other than Kenny Moore, I don't necessarily trust that cornerback group in Indianapolis. Rock Ya-Sin is all right, and I think they might still have Xavier Rhodes. I'm not exactly sure on that. But I think if you can bring in J.C. Jackson, who has been one of the best cornerbacks in the league for the last couple of years, and he's not going to be cheap, but if you can bring him in, he instantly raises the ceiling of that defense that's already one of the best in the league. So put a guy on the outside that you can trust, along with Kenny Moore, who I believe plays in the slot and can play outside. There's no reason not to do that, because if you want to compete for Super Bowls, you can't be getting beat on the outside by receivers. So bring in a guy like J.C. Jackson who can help lock down a receiver on the opposing team, and it's just going to make it easier for that front seven to get to work. Next, I have Devondre Campbell, a linebacker for the Green Bay Packers, and I think the Seattle Seahawks should prioritize signing him. They just recently released Bobby Wagner, which was a surprise, but it also wasn't at the same time, simply due to money. So with him gone, that leaves a massive hole at their middle linebacker spot, and all Devondre Campbell did when he signed a cheap contract to go to Green Bay was light the league up and be a first-team All-Pro linebacker. So if I'm Seattle, it'll probably cost a little bit more than you'd like to get him, but there's no reason not to sign him. He's younger than Bobby Wagner, and if he can continue the production that he had this last year in Green Bay, I think it'll be a worthwhile signing, and it will probably be one of the most underrated signings of the offseason. Next, I have DJ Chark, a wide receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I think the Las Vegas Raiders should prioritize signing him. They don't really have a lot at wide receiver. Henry Ruggs, not really going to talk about that situation, and then they had Deshaun Jackson, but he's old, and you can't really rely on him for much longer, if at all. So bringing a guy like DJ Chark, who is, I believe, 6'4", so he's massive, and he has legit 4.4 speed, so he can blow the top off of defenses, and with that size and speed, he's a really reliable guy down the field. And I think he can really help open up the field for a guy like Derek Carr, who won't have a true good number one receiver if they don't sign a guy like Chark. So bringing him in is really going to help that team, who just has a really lackluster receiving core going into this year. Next, I have Allen Robinson, a wide receiver for the Chicago Bears, and I have the Green Bay Packers prioritizing signing him. The last time he was in free agency, it was between the Green Bay Packers and Chicago Bears to sign him, and I don't see any reason why he shouldn't go to Green Bay now. Aaron Rodgers is the two-time defending MVP over the last two seasons. Green Bay is poised to make another strong Super Bowl push this year. And if I'm Green Bay, why not go out and sign another guy that can be reliable on the other side of Davante Adams and can create one of the best 1-2 receiver punches in the entire league? The next I have Juju Smith-Schuster, a wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I have him going to the Kansas City Chiefs. Last year, it was reported that Kansas City was making a push to sign him, but then he ended up going back to Pittsburgh on a 1-year deal. And then this year, I believe his season was ended due to shoulder surgery. I think he might have came back during the playoffs, but he was still hurt for most of the season, so he's not exactly going to be expecting a huge contract, or probably won't be getting a huge contract. So if I'm the Chiefs, and the Chiefs don't really have a lot at wide receiver behind Tyreek Hill, so I don't see any reason why they shouldn't bring in Juju Smith-Schuster, who would be a great number 2 receiver behind Hill. Next, I have Stephon Gilmore, a cornerback for the Carolina Panthers, and I have him going to the Buffalo Bills. I think he should go back to where it all started. I mean, he was drafted by the Buffalo Bills in, I believe, 2012 with a very high first-round pick. He was a really solid corner there before going to New England and then Carolina. And I think Buffalo just needs a really solid and trustworthy number 2 corner alongside Tre'Davious White. And Gilmore might get a really big contract, or a bigger contract than people would think, simply because he was Defensive Player of the Year just 2 or 3 years ago, I think. But if I'm Buffalo, I'd prioritize getting a guy like Gilmore in there who, like I said, was one of the best man corners in the league and was just Defensive Player of the Year a couple years ago. Put him alongside Tre'Davious White, and it'll be really difficult for teams to pass on you. Next, I have Dante Jackson, another cornerback from the Carolina Panthers, and I also have him going to the Buffalo Bills. So if they can't get Gilmore, I think they should prioritize getting Dante Jackson. He's, I believe, 25 or 26 years old, and he's extremely fast on the outside at corner. So pairing him alongside Tre'Davious White, like with Gilmore, you're just having a really solid cornerback duo that you don't really have at the moment. And especially if a guy like Tre'Davious White goes down like he did this last season, you want a guy in there that you can rely on to be your number 1 corner, and I don't think they have that, but they would in Dante Jackson. Next, I have Evan Ingram, a tight end for the New York Giants, and I have the Green Bay Packers signing him. They don't really have a lot at tight end, especially if they don't bring back Robert Tonyan. I think they will, just because he's going to be cheap and he'll probably want to come back to Green Bay. But I think there were talks that Green Bay was going to try to trade for Evan Ingram at this past year's trade deadline. I mean, he's extremely fast. He's kind of a glorified receiver at the tight end position. So if you can bring him in and give legit speed at that tight end position that they don't currently have, I mean, just do whatever you have to do to keep Aaron Rodgers happy, because as long as he's in Green Bay, you have a shot at a Super Bowl. Next, I have Leighton Vander Esch, a linebacker for the Dallas Cowboys, and I have the Philadelphia Eagles signing him. Leighton Vander Esch lit the league up as a rookie, was absolutely crazy, and then has kind of fallen off since then due to injuries, and I think the relationship between he and the Cowboys organization is kind of not great. And the Eagles, they just need linebackers. I think they have linebackers, but I don't really think Alex Singleton is going to be your linebacker of the future. So bring in a guy like Leighton Vander Esch, who is extremely athletic and, like I said, was really, really good in his rookie year. Like, he's kind of fallen off, but if you can get Leighton Vander Esch into that locker room, he's instantly the best linebacker that they've had in a couple years and could really help the middle of that defense and fill a hole that has been there for a couple years. Next, I have James Daniels, an offensive guard for the Chicago Bears, and I have the Chicago Bears signing him and keeping him in Chicago. The Bears are bad. Like, that offensive line, there's some guys on that offensive line that have potential, and one of them is James Daniels, and I think they'd be making a huge mistake by letting him go, because if Justin Fields is your franchise guy, I don't see why you wouldn't keep a guy in the locker room that he's comfortable with, that he trusts, and that he already has a relationship with because of the year of playing with him. And he's only like 24 or 25, so he's still really young, and you can get a lot of years out of him. And if you want a solid offensive line, just keep him there. There's really no negative in keeping him. Yeah, you might have to overpay him, but if you want to protect Justin Fields, that's what you're going to have to do. Next, I have Carlton Davis, a cornerback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I have the New England Patriots signing him. If the Patriots do end up losing J.C. Jackson because they didn't place the franchise tag on him and he's going to be getting big offers in free agency, I think they should go out and sign, or at least try to sign, Carlton Davis. Really young player for the Bucs, has been a solid corner since coming into the league, so I don't see any reason why they wouldn't at least offer him a contract to come in, be their number one corner. And a lot of these guys are going to want to play for Bill Belichick in hopes of going back to the Super Bowl and trying to recreate the success that team had for 20 years. And I mean, outside of J.C. Jackson, who they're potentially losing in free agency, their cornerback room is awful. Like, it's horrible. At least in my opinion, I think it's awful. So I don't see why they shouldn't at least try to sign a guy like Carlton Davis. Next, I have Hassan Reddick, an edge rusher for the Carolina Panthers, and I have the Seattle Seahawks signing him. Seahawks freed up a lot of money getting rid of Russell Wilson and Bobby Wagner, and their pass rushing is horrible. Bringing a guy like Hassan Reddick, who has been really solid these last couple years, he might be a little expensive, but just bringing a guy who could help that pass rush that so badly needs it because they are absolutely horrific. I mean, that's really all there is to it. Bringing a guy who can help your pass rush that you might not be able to get in the draft. Next, I have Jadeveon Clowney, an edge rusher for the Cleveland Browns, and I have the Cleveland Browns re-signing him. Outside of Myles Garrett, Clowney was the only sack production that the Browns had, so there's no reason to not keep him. I mean, having an athletic freak in Myles Garrett on one side and then having another athletic freak in Jadeveon Clowney on the other side, it's just really hard to block both of those if they're both healthy and playing at the top of their game. Clowney has kind of been looked down upon in the eyes of some people because he hasn't played as great as you'd think a number one overall pick should or would, but I think the Browns would be stupid to not at least attempt to keep him on the roster. Odell Beckham Jr., a wide receiver for the Los Angeles Rams, and I have the Rams re-signing him. He really likes it in Los Angeles the way it seems. He just won a Super Bowl there, and I think the Rams are going to sign him to a cheaper deal, at least not a cheap for Odell standards and receiver standards in the league, and he's going to rehab, and I think he's hungry for another Super Bowl after tasting one, so I don't see any reason why Los Angeles wouldn't try to keep the band together, and that means bringing Odell back to LA. Next, I have Bobby Wagner, a linebacker for the was a linebacker for the Seattle Seahawks. They just released him, but I have him going to the Dallas Cowboys. If the Cowboys decide to not re-sign Leighton Vander Esch, bringing in Bobby Wagner would be perfect for them. Pair him alongside Micah Parsons, and you instantly have one of the best linebacking cores in the league, regardless of who that third or fourth guy is on the roster. I mean, I think that's really all there is to it. Bobby Wagner's great. Going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer probably, so end of discussion. Next, I have Marcus May, a safety for the New York Jets. I have the Philadelphia Eagles signing him. He's coming off an Achilles injury, so he's not going to be super expensive, and the Eagles don't really have a lot at safety. I don't trust Kevon Wallace. I don't trust Zach McPherson. I don't trust Rodney McLeod, so bringing a guy like Marcus May who can instantly help out the back end of that defense when he's healthy and they could potentially get him on a cheaper 2-year or even just a 1-year prove-it deal. But I think regardless, that would be a really big signing for the Eagles. Next, I have Michael Gallup, a wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys, and I have the Dallas Cowboys keeping him. He is coming off of an ACL injury, I believe, so he won't be available for most of the season. But if they are going to release or trade Amari Cooper, like reports are saying, I think they need to keep Michael Gallup at all costs because Cedric Wilson isn't it. I don't think he's a great wide receiver too alongside CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb is great, but you need another guy alongside him, in my opinion. Michael Gallup's there. He knows the organization. He knows the game plan. He knows everyone. So why not keep him in the building instead of letting him go to a potential rival team? Because I've seen the Eagles are interested in him as well. Next, I have Justin Reed, a safety for the Houston Texans, and I have the New York Jets signing him. If the Jets decide to not bring back Marcus May, I think it would be really smart for them to bring in Justin Reed, who's one of the best young safeties in the league, and let Robert Saleh pick who he wants on that roster, because he really didn't have a lot of say in some of the guys that were already there. So bring in Justin Reed, who is athletic, he's fast, and he can really help bring that young secondary together, and I think he can do a lot of stuff that Robert Saleh is going to want his defensive backs to do. And next, I have Melvin Gordon, a running back for the Denver Broncos, and I have him staying in Denver. He and Javonte Williams were a really solid 1-2 punch this year when they played. I don't really know if they were more of a you're doing better, so you're starting, or how that whole rotation actually worked, but they had pretty similar seasons in terms of touches and yards and everything like that. So, and I think both teams have expressed interest in bringing the two back together, so I don't see any reason why they shouldn't do that, especially with Russell Wilson on the team. Bring back Melvin Gordon. Pretty sure the two played in college together, so it only makes sense. And then I do have two honorable mentions. They aren't technically free agents yet, but there are talks that they might become free agents or become available in general. So I have Amari Cooper, a wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys, and I have the New England Patriots getting him. I mean, Amari Cooper would instantly be a number one receiver on the Patriots. I don't really like anyone else they have. He would be really helpful for the growth and development of young quarterback Mac Jones. And, I mean, Bill Belichick and that Patriots team just need a solid wide receiver at the moment. That's really all there is to it. I don't like what they have in Amari Cooper. Although he is expensive right now, he's one of the best receivers in the league, in my opinion, when healthy. So no reason not to bring him into the team. And then lastly, I have DeMarcus Lawrence, a defensive end for the Dallas Cowboys. And I have the Los Angeles Chargers signing him. That might be a little weird because I don't necessarily know if he fits into their 3-4 scheme, but I think with his size he could. I think he could easily play a 3-4 defensive end. He might be a little light for the position, but when healthy, I think he's one of the best defensive ends and pass rushers in the league. His production speaks for itself, and he is a little bit expensive right now, so I don't know how that's all going to work out, but I don't see any reason why the Chargers shouldn't or wouldn't be interested in him if he does become available. But I am recording this on March 9th, and you will probably be seeing this video on March 13th. With that said, certain players may become free agents in the days between the recording and posting of this video. The free agents I looked at in this video were just ones that were available to me at the time of recording. I also want to say that I have my first mock draft coming out on the 14th, so the day after this video comes out, but it was also recorded days before it was posted. That means some teams' draft picks in the video will definitely look silly, with teams trading players and releasing them as well in the coming days. This mock draft was recorded before Bobby Wagner was released and Carson Wentz was traded as well, so just kind of ignore that when you get to the mock draft. So thank you. And as always, I am your host, Parker Striha, and this has been the Striha Sports Podcast. Our random sport fact of the day is that one of the greatest boxers of all time, Muhammad Ali, finished his career with a 56-5 record, including 37 knockouts. As always, thank you for tuning in, and don't forget to hit that notification bell for whenever a new video gets posted.